So I have an idea. I think, given the technology we have, the age we live in, that it might even be practical. Um, the way we manage elections here in the United States is just crap. We're governed by an entrenched oligarchy that's bought and paid for by corporations. But worse than that, we're gerrymandered all to hell and back by the Republicans, giving them an ironclad control over the House of Representatives. The vote, it was split almost 50-50 in 2016, but they got 55% of the seats. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a very comfortable margin of control. And that is without having been able to gerrymander every single state. Okay? Just to give you an example of what gerrymandering can do, in North Carolina, they gerrymandered such that they got less than 50% of the votes, but managed to get 9 out of the 13 representatives there in North Carolina, a supermajority. So, hooray for gerrymandering. Anyway, they have a margin of control that can't really be broken by anything except a tidal wave of resentment. Now, I'm not sure I really trust direct democracy, which we could also implement. It's just too easy for uninformed people to get swept up in emotional garbage. I mean, just look at how Republican voters responded to Obamacare. They hated it for the last 8 years. Then the Republicans finally got the White House, meaning they didn't have to worry about a presidential veto, meaning they could finally repeal Obamacare. And that's when Republican voters finally learned that Obamacare, the Obamacare that they've hated, is the same thing as the Affordable Care Act, which they love. And then they lost their goddamn minds. And sure, people have noticed and hated Republican bullshit regarding the tax cut for the rich, net neutrality, and the few other things they barely managed to do that screw the poor in favor of the rich over the last year. But how many things have they snuck through in the meantime? Well, people have been arguing over whether Trump is genocidal monster or just a garden variety piece of shit, racist. The fascists have put dozens of awful judges into offices they'll hold for life. So people have right-wing assholes have proven that they definitely can't be trusted with direct democracy. I don't think the left would be that much better. Their ignorance surrounding vaccines and GMOs, just to give 2 examples, is pretty ridiculous. So I want some sort of representative democracy, but I want a representative democracy that can't be gerrymandered. Okay? Europeans have somehow managed to avoid that part of the problem with their representation, but they still have a few problems. So my idea relies on the fact that we live in the information age. People can vote for anyone at any time, and the result can be recorded, verified, and known. Why do we need to have an election every 2 years? Why do people need to be lumped in with their closest neighbors in order to decide who their representative is? Why should we have an election where a certain number of votes just don't matter because only 50% plus 1 is needed to win? Why not have a system where every representative is chosen by petition or something like a petition? Once you're an adult, you get to choose your representatives by putting your name on the petition or ballot or list. And once that candidate has enough names on their ballot, they're a representative. Okay? You can put your name on at any time. You can take it off at any time. It wouldn't even matter where that person lives or where you live if we're talking about a national representative. And this could work just as easily in a federated government. I mean, you have representatives with ballots or petitions at every level, and you can put your name on a ballot at every level. I mean, for example, I live in the U.S., in the state and in a city. I don't see why I couldn't put my name down for a representative at each level, city, state, and federal, right? Obviously, this system wouldn't work for electing a president, and I'm okay with that. I detest the office of the presidency. No one person should have that much power and be so hard to remove from office. I'm picturing a parliamentary system, a unicameral legislature with a prime minister figure chosen by the representatives at large. Now, one flaw in this system is that it could also be swayed by emotions and fads, right? Representative Bob makes a gaffe on Tuesday, and on Wednesday he's no longer a representative. Then citizen Angela says something witty on YouTube, and by Friday she's sitting in Bob's seat, which is still warm, by the way. I think this would be mollified, or could be mollified, by the fact that every representative chosen this way would only have one vote. I mean, if more signatures gave you more voting power, that would be a problem and would encourage people to all sign up for one candidate. I don't think a single emotional surge would be enough to completely swamp the system, but I could be wrong there. Now, an emotional surge could be enough to change the course of a single vote. I think a check on that might be that a new representative can't vote on measures put on the table before they were elected, before they got enough names. I like the idea of representatives losing the power to vote as soon as they drop below the required number of signatures, and having a delay on the power to vote when they come into office. I also think you could help this along by requiring a quorum. A certain fraction of the total number of representatives need to be able to vote for a measure in order for it to be even considered. Now, that way, an emotional surge could immediately put a stop to unpopular legislation, by removing representatives in favor of it, which might even take it below quorum and thus take it off the table. That process might also pass legislation by removing votes against the legislation, but that could also take it below quorum, which would take the bill off the table entirely. So it would be harder for this process to pass a measure than to prevent it passing. Now, I think this idea relies on modern technology, which would also make it vulnerable to hacking. Fuck you, Russia. If this idea is at all workable, I think that would be the fatal flaw. I don't really like the idea of some asshole putting our government on hiatus with a DDoS attack or putting some small-name idiots in Parliament in order to put things in a tailspin. Also, I'm not a mathematician or statistician. I don't have the knowledge or training necessary to analyze whether this sort of system would be doable or stable on a national scale. It might be that giving citizens the freedom to add or remove representatives at a moment's notice could render a government unable to function. Personally, I doubt that. People like to stick with the status quo. But I do really like the idea. I wish I could get it in front of people who could analyze it in all the ways it needs to be analyzed. Political scientists, communications, security types, Nate Silver, or a 13-year-old with serious personality flaws, whoever could poke holes in it. What do you think?